starting the live stream, and then we'll begin the meeting. Okay, so we're live. Okay, so I will call this special council meeting to order at 6:02. And are there any declaration of interest at this point in time? Anybody have an interest to declare? No interest, no hands up on the camera, and we'll go to number 3, which is in-camera session, in camera, which we have no in-camera session. And I'm going to do a 3.1 and hand over the floor to our esteemed counselor from the Sealy's Bay area, Mr. Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just preamble to this, we've been through this plague now for, it seems like forever, and we've lost so many people near us, our family, friends, and under other circumstances, others that we could not mourn. We couldn't apply the rituals. So to acknowledge one among us who has passed perhaps helps us honor others that we haven't been able to honor. So on that note, on Saturday, Russell Thompson of Sealy's Bay took his leave. He was 102. Born in Manitoba in 1919, he was a teenager in the Depression and a 20-something when he joined so many to serve in the armed forces as a volunteer, committed to ending that horrible tyranny as quickly as possible and getting himself home. That's what he wanted to do, to get on with his life. Now, historians like to define generations by the events of their time. Having been raised by people both born in 1919, but they didn't have me until their 60s, I just want to make that point, who shared similar experiences with Russ. My view is that their experience as young people was less about what defined them and more about what informed them in their adult lives. So hard work, family, community, prudence, stewardship, parsimony, peace, and good humor. Russ Thompson exemplified all of that. Russ told me a few years ago when I was telling who I was, I shouldn't worry about being an incomer because he had been an incomer since 1948 when his family moved to Sealy's Bay. I immediately felt at home. There are lots of stories and more are being posted that reflect the wit and wisdom he shared with us about gardening and mostly about not spending money. I chatted with Russ last week while he was out weeding his vegetable garden. I asked him how that was going. That was only last week. He said he was more comfortable at the casino. On Sunday, I asked Earl how they were all doing, his son, and among other things he said, I'm sure as we speak, Dad is having a crown royal with St. Peter discussing how the garden can be improved. This, I truly believe, is happening. In a world that seems to measure success by what people have acquired rather than by how people are, I again asked Earl, what is the lesson, the teaching, the gift Russ shared and leaves us? What is the measure of this man? Earl said, my dad never measured success by the people behind him, but rather by the people beside him. No more needs be said. Thank you for that gift, Russell Thompson. We promise to share it, I'm sure. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jameson. And I would just like to add that it was an honor to, along with other council members who were here, to pin the first poppy on 2 occasions on Mr. Thompson. And he always did have a quip or a joke, and he was always happy regardless. Might have grumbled about the odd thing, to let you know what he thought about things, but he was still happy about being here. And no words are truer than to say that his family meant everything to him. And I know that he leaves behind a very dedicated, steadfast Thompson family, that legacy that will forever be living into him and his dreams and hopes for the future. So thank you very much for that. Moving on in our agenda to staff reports. Administration report SR-074-22 RFP ADM 2022-001 Electronic Document and Records Management System EDRMS Award. And the motion, I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Maybe. and Council Fode to second. The council award proposal RFP ADM 2022-001 Electronic Document and Records Management System EDRMS to Think Docs Inc. at a total value of $16,577. Discussion on this motion. Go ahead, Counselor. Maybe I know you want to put your hand up.
Well, I always have something, don't I? Yes. When I was reading this, it does list the first vendor. Can you disclose the second and third vendor who was part of this bidding process? And then a couple of questions. Does this program save all formats of documents, or does it convert to a standard format? And are these just for e-copies, or are hard copies going to be scanned and put into this system then? Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Great questions. So the second vendor was Image Advantage Solutions, Inc. And we also had Rico Canada Inc. as well. And in regards to saving all formats, they are applicable to anything in Microsoft Office, which is great for us. And then in terms of e-copies and paper copies, we are looking to transfer both of those over. So they are able to help us in both ways. That was Rico Canada Inc.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just perhaps technical question. Is it proven that the system will mesh with our ongoing security system we have now?
Madam Clerk. Oh, CAO will address this question.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. The solution that we're proposing is software as a service solution. So it will be resident in the cloud. I believe the cloud behind this, the cloud vendor, is Amazon. They have world-class security. They have hundreds of security professionals that work to preserve the integrity of their cloud farms. And so we would be benefiting from their level of security, as well as the vendor Laserfish's level of security as well. Far outweighs what we can do as our own little organization as far as security goes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Fode.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. What time frame are they looking at, or are we looking at for them to start?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you. They would probably be starting immediately after we award them this project. I believe they would be providing us with a series of deadlines and timelines that we would have to make, something that all of us staff will have to participate in. Essentially, we'll go through the government review of everything we have here at the township, and then proceed to staff training and onwards and upwards.
Go ahead, Councillor Fode.
A follow-up, thank you. With that in mind, with staff training, from that point forward, would it be assumed that staff would then put the records into that system directly?
Through you, it would be a series of them helping us transfer the records over, as well as ourselves scanning over the paper documents that we have. There's a series of information that we have to make sure that we include while we transfer over these documents. For example, the metadata classification, everything applicable to Tom RIMS. So it'll be both staff here as well as the staff with ThinkDocs Inc.
And my final follow-up, if I may, thank you. This all marries or merges in neatly with our asset management plan?
Through your worship, I believe it does. They're able to going through the demonstrations and, having our director of finance, our director of planning and development there, they're able to help with any records across the board here at the township. And I think they'll do a great job of doing that and making sure that they accommodate all of our needs.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions in regards to this award of a tender? I just might make a couple or ask a couple of questions myself. I know that the total value of the management system is $16,577, obviously by the motion, but as far as ongoing management costs, this is a one-time fee that we're paying up front, but then there's additional costs, I'm assuming, as in the data. And there's no way to gauge how much that's going to be at this point due to depending on the volume of documents, that sort of thing. Okay. So I just wanted to be clear on that. The other thing that I would like to say, just for the benefit of the public, part of the reason that we had to have a special meeting this evening and we're unable to have the motion come forward at council last week was mainly because there were the tender, the bidders were still doing demonstrations, and the discussion and the decision hadn't been made in time to get the report onto last week's council agenda. So just so everybody is aware, the other part of that reason is that the funding that goes with this, we have to report back, I believe, to the province before the end of the month. So it was another reason why we couldn't push this to the June timeframe, but we're more than going to hit the deadline, and we'll be well on our way to transferring over to this system, and hopefully in the future being able to really be able to pinpoint. Data management has come such a long way since we even started. I forget, it's when we started, I want to say it was almost 10 years ago, we started saving things digitally, but the challenge is that the software has become much more powerful. And when they talk about metadata, it's being able to pick out the words. And it's almost like a Google search, right? That they can find anything anywhere within our digital documentation. And that will make us much more nimble when people are looking for data. When we're looking for data in order to reference, whether it's bylaws, building permits, records on machines that we bought and what we paid for them, or what service work was done, God knows how many ages and eons ago. So, and it's funny, the one thing I've learned is that you never know when you might need that piece of paper that you had 16 years ago. Or in the case of a discussion tonight, dealing with the planner on a matter, there was a piece of paper from 1988, handwritten motion that came to council. Might not have been worded 100% correctly at the time back then, but when you know better, you do better. But having those very vital pieces of paper in order to have that trail is so important for us to do our job on a regular basis here today. So go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, through the discussion, I was kind of wondering, and I don't remember what the budget item or what was budgeted for this item. So I'm not sure whether
Go ahead, Madam
what
Clerk.
there was, and also if there's a licensing fee annually.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So the estimated cost was approximately a total of 230,000 plus the non-recoverable portion of HST. As well, when it comes to budgeting for license, I believe they only gave us the approximate cost for a one-year license, but that's something that we could work out in further discussions with them as well.
At the end of the day, the other point I wanted to make was just to underscore what the clerk had said about the involvement of the senior managers in making this decision, because it's not just the clerk that uses the platform, it's everybody. And that the successful tender or the successful bidder, I should say, they are very committed to ensuring the training that is required gets executed here so that everybody is consistent. And the one thing I know in my own business, if you don't save things the right way up front, it's harder to find them. So if everybody is consistent in the way that they do things going forward, it'll make things much easier for the current staff and the future staff looking for things. Go ahead, Brock.
Thank you. And I'm confused as to the costs of this program. It's been asked. I didn't understand the answer. And none of it's in this report. And this report does not begin to cover, from what I'm just hearing now, the full scope. Could someone flesh that out? We've called a special council meeting, I'd like to hear something fleshed out on this. $17,000 struck me as being very low. So what's reality here? Thank you.
So I'll ask the clerk to respond and then the CAO if there's anything additional.
Thank you, through you. Great question. So we, in terms of awarding this contract to Think Docs Inc., we'll have them, come through and provide us a document management solution. So they're going to carry out the scope of the work, having meetings with us, going through the government review, implementing a strategy where they can work with staff, how we're going to transfer over the e-copies, paper copies, and then as well as training, and then moving forward. Think Docs Inc. going through the demonstration, I feel as though the software that they use will allow our township to evolve in many ways. So it's not just about, moving over records. It's also, providing us different ways that we can engage with the public, whether it be online forums or survey development, public consultation. So although the scope of the work hasn't started yet, there is going to be several deadlines and timelines in place, and they will walk us through that process.
Go ahead, Councilor Rowe.
So following up from that, then really what we're looking at now is who we've awarded, or we're thinking of awarding to this group. But really, it's the initial step. It sounds like it's just we're getting our toes wet here in the water, and they're going to come, and then this thing is going to flesh out. Is that fair to say? And then the real costs are going to start presenting themselves. Or has that been discussed? How is this being paid for in the future? Not from what funding source, but if this is just getting our toes wet, and we all understand the importance of management of records, but I, at this moment, don't have a clue as to what kind of money's involved. And I find it hard to believe that someone hasn't had that discussion, because $17,000 is just a starting point. So can someone help us out there? Is it a multi-year project? Is it, it should be, I guess, if they're going to be training involved. So are we going to have ongoing costs year after year of this thing? That's all. Sounds like a good idea. I just don't have a clue as to how much money you're talking.
Perhaps the CAO wants to
Thousands?
answer on behalf of the treasurer. Unfortunately, the treasurer is on vacation this week, so she was unable to attend, but I'm sure the CAO can address that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Councilor Gorell's quite correct. This is the toe in the water. This gives us the basic system from which we can start to work from. We are scoping out the extent of our records and what records will need to have a little more attention paid to them, as far as having metadata attached to them so that they're searchable, as the mayor had alluded to. So this is a phased approach, Brock. It's going to take us months, could be a year or two to get this. But we first have to land on a system that we're going to standardize on for our record management, and this is what this is. So after this will come, we'll scope out the records. Once we have the system in place, we'll start to be able to transition a lot of the easier records over, lower levels type stuff. But we're going to be assessing what needs some major work, and what help do we need to get from outside to help us get this done. Just as we retained an outside firm to help us scan all those old documents digitally, now we're going to need somebody who's going to come in and be able to spend the time, review the documents that we identify that need metadata, and attach them and make sure that they moved over. It's not simply select all on a file directory and transfer it over to the system, because it's almost flying blind at that point. So it has to be done very thoughtfully. And what part of this program with this vendor, they'll be able to provide us with the consultation or the expertise in that field to basically guide us into what our next step is after this, and where's the logical plan. So we're at this stage where we've got this Tom Room system that has served us. It's out. It hasn't been maintained properly. It's not used properly. I'm the first one to stick up my hand and say, I can't find stuff on it. Our record retentions are not being applied evenly. What we need to get is some sanity, and just having the right tool is the first step. Having people trained to use it properly is the next step, and applying we'll set the record retention policies and all that. It's just, as you pointed out, it's not a one and done kind of process. It's an ongoing thing. I believe the ongoing licensing cost is somewhere around 4,000 a year. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money. And with that, we get all the security updates, new tools, all that sort of stuff. There's also more modules that we can, as we're more comfortable with, we can expand and do different things with the tool as we see fit. And one of the things that we're looking at is integration with HR stuff, with time sheets. And there's certain things that can be done already through Citywide if we add the modules for building and planning, for instance. So this is really, we're just starting off on a pretty big project here. And so we need to, as we get more comfortable with this, as we understand what our requirements are going to be, we're going to be coming back to council saying, okay, here's the next thing that we're doing, and here's the next thing after that. So it's not, we're not just kind of throwing something on a wall and saying, hey, it's done. It's, we don't know what we don't know just yet. And as we start embarking on this step and getting to work with with ThinkDocs, we'll get more information. We'll understand what the requirements are. We'll scope it in a manageable way with set timelines and milestones. And we'll be back in front of council, keeping you updated regularly.
And just, thank you, Steve. Would the first timeline be established yet to regarding this $17,000? Would that first timeline be September?
I think from ThinkDocs, I sat in on the product demonstrations, and we have to have a kickoff meeting with them, and we have to understand, they also have to understand exactly what they're getting into with us. So I imagine it'll be, the first meeting or so, we'll be able to flesh out a timeline. But for the life of me, I can't remember if they had a sample timeline start to finish on this, and maybe the clerk can answer.
Through you, I believe they did as well up until mid-February, late February.
And just I'll recognize Councillor Jameson as another point of interest, and I think it's already been mentioned, the total line item in our budget for this year is 230,000 for this project. This is just, as Steve said, to get the initial choice for the software and then move forward with the project, and that they'll be coming back with further commitments for funding and what have you. There is also funding from the provincial government, I think, under special project, or sorry, not special projects, under modernization funding. So we received modernization funding to execute this project originally. And that was this is one of the timeline markers, is why we have to award to ensure that the process is moving forward by the end of May. So Councillor Jameson, go ahead.
You really made the point I was going to ask about with respect to money in place to move forward. I mean, we all know this type of thing can be such a black hole, but I appreciate the staff's very diligent on making sure we don't fall into that black hole. But knowing that we have put in place some money to ensure that we don't find ourselves stepping wrong. So thank you for that.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Your Worship. If council will recall, we did earlier this year the service delivery review, and that was kind of step one of the modernization funding. The province changed its funding model and said you need to have a third-party external consultant do a report on certain things that you're seeking modernization funding for, and it needs to spell out kind of the rough playing field of what we wanted to do, idea of costs and savings that go along with this. So that was step one. We submitted that report and said, hey, records management is a project. Look at what the service delivery review has come back with. And the province accepted that and said, okay, fine, we'll approve some funding. And now you're on that path to doing that. So get going on the project. And this coming up the end of May is a progress report is due. So we wanted to show them that we've made substantial progress on the project. We've picked a product, we've picked a vendor, and now we're moving forward. So that should keep the modernization funding people happy, seeing that we're actually moving this thing forward.
Thank you. Counselor Gorell, you had your hand up again?
No, I was confused when I heard someone said there was a line item in this year's budget of $250,000. I'm unaware of that, or
Maybe it wasn't in the budget. We had it approved because the funding came through. I'm trying to remember. I just remember that there was funding that was
that's a lot
granted
of
to
money.
us.
That would have stuck in my memory. I'm just a little fuzzy on that one to blindly someone.
Oh, the clerk has her hand up, so I'll let
What was
her go
that?
ahead.
I refreshed my memory on $250,000. Thank you.
Thank you, through you. Just for clarification, so the total amount of funding that we received through the Municipal Modernization Fund for intake 3 was $152,131. And the timeline for finalizing this is February 28th, 2023.
Perfect. Now, unfortunately, because Kate's not here and doesn't have her budget binder in front of her. Oh, the CAO does have the. note?
No, I don't, but
Oh.
I will take that as an action item and I will report back to Councilor Gorell and council as to what's in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Venditti has some information to give.
Sorry, thank you. Just to add to that, there was a report brought to council a few meetings ago for the matching funding because the modernization funding provided up to 65% of the total budget cost or of the total cost. So we had the budget allocated through a few meetings ago, which is the remainder 35%. So that's the amount that's within the
So-
current budget.
That's right, because the government required that we put in some of our own money in order to make this go. So it's not a $250,000, as you say, Councillor Gorell, not from our specific pocket, although it's from the collective pocket of the taxpayer, whether it's provincial, federal, municipal. But as the clerk said, the amount from the province and the timeline. So that's why we have to keep moving on this.
So unlike the ICON funding, they'd like some skin in the game.
It wasn't the money that fell from the sky like the first modernization funding that just, when we got the call and said, here's your 634,000 and what do you want us to do with it? Whatever you like. And it was very strange. And luckily, I think we've allocated all of that at this point to move forward with projects. So anyways, thank you for your questions, Councilor Gorell. Any further questions from council? Any further comments from staff? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? And we're carried. Thank you. Okay, best of luck to the staff with a new system. I know that's always a bit of a challenge, but I know everybody's up to it. So I need a mover and a seconder for council to adjourn. Councillor Foti moving. Councillor Maybe is seconding. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? And we're carried. Thank you, everyone.